go, Jim. He's dead.
You're listening to Improv Autopsy. I'm Stephen Cadwell, your host, and welcome to part one of my interview with the incomparable Joe Bill. Like many others who have seen Joe Bill and Mark Sutton in Bass Prov, I was highly influenced by my exposure to their groundbreaking show. Coming from a predominantly short-form background, seeing that show really blew the doors off of what I thought an improv set could look like. It wasn't that I wanted to immediately duplicate what I had seen, but that the realm of possibility had grown exponentially. That and a few other similar experiences led me out of the improv wardrobe and into improv Narnia. My improv heart grew 3 sizes that day. My improv angel got its wings, something like that. Joe Bill's influence, I believe, also stems from his being the epitome of improv punk. He hasn't sought out a fiefdom of his own to wield power over those hungry to learn, but instead embodies an ethos of rebellion and bucking authority, and in doing so has influenced more improvisers than many theater owners. I enjoyed learning more about Joe Bill's improv journey, and I'm sure you will as well. So here it is, part one of Joe Bill's Improv Autopsy. When did improv enter your consciousness? When did you first become aware of improv as a thing?
In high school in 1976, which means I am now completing my 49th year of improvisation. So part of drama class, I guess the first thing was we would do like 1-minute mimes. So it would be like how do you tell a story in 1 minute was kind of the first orientation. And then after that, then we learned some basic improv games. There was like a poetry game that we would play, like Emotion Option. It was Emotional Roller Coaster back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much like thinking on your feet. And then in the context of drama class, I guess that would have been sophomore year, like how to ad lib if you forget your lines in a play.
Yeah.
So that's when I first.
Okay, Indianapolis. And was your drama teacher, was that just from their theater background, or did they have a connection to any of the names that we would know, Spolin or anything?
And Hello, Dolly, the musical. And so she was very much like a high school drama teacher in the vein of Hello, Dolly, in the vein of Auntie Mame, like 70s musical. She was like very expressive in a theater teacher kind of way. And we had these great monologues from Neil Simon, who was the funniest one out there. And I don't think Something Wonderful Right Away had been written yet. I should tell you, I'm horrible with dates. So I think she knew about improvisation for the theater. I think she knew about Spolin. And so maybe some of the games or some of the ideas about like environment and like using your where for like Mime 101 would come up when we were doing the quote unquote pantomimes to tell a story. So,
yeah.
But I mean, she never, we're in Indiana in the 70s. So, well,
Yeah. Well, it's impressive that that kind of, my high school didn't have a drama program, really. We did a musical every year, and that was pretty much it. So I'm always jealous of the people that encountered it in that form that young.
Yeah, I'm not sure really how she ended up there. I know she had been there for a few years before I got to her, but my high school, I think it was maybe, I started there my sophomore year. I think that was the year that it became the Performing Arts Magnet School, High School of Indianapolis. And so we had a pretty robust theater program. And yeah, I was pretty much like a sports, music, and theater kid all coming up through high school.
And when was the theater fire lit? And was comedy always a part of that, or did that come about later?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm the oldest of 5 kids. I was always able to make people laugh. I was also like, I was named after my father, but I did not have the brute instinct of a Notre Dame football player. I just didn't see the sense. I didn't take joy in physical collisions, padded or not, like two of my all-state football playing brothers did. And so being named after him and having more of an affinity for like hats and costumes and singing and dancing, which did not translate to the football field. I didn't know really that that was an entertainment thing, but I knew I could make people laugh. I was the director for the rest of my siblings when we would perform during dessert of my parents' dinner parties. And then I also had a sense when I was young, I was a very dramatic child, and I had a sense that I was like born into the wrong family and something wasn't right. And like there was something about Catholicism that just something seemed wrong to me. And so it seemed performative, though I didn't know the word performative. I realized I could make people laugh. I could entertain people. I could also say edgy things. But the first time I got my mouth washed out with soap was around like 70. I was like 8 years old. And it's like 70, 71. I think I was crazy about the Manson family and the Manson family trials and Charles Manson, 1969, the murders and all of this shit. Like I was fascinated by that and by cults. And I really didn't make the connection until this moment where they had arrested the girls from the Spawn Ranch and like Tex Watson and some of his underlings, but they couldn't arrest Manson. And I remember it's like, because he didn't do anything, but he was like the mastermind or something. And then so they finally arrested Manson. I'm going to say like 70, 71 maybe. And I asked my mom, I said, why are they arresting him if he didn't kill anybody? And my mom said, well, he was just a leader. So he gets everybody else to do, the evil stuff and the bad stuff. And he keeps his hands clean. And I said, so is Manson kind of like the Pope? And immediately my ass was in the bathroom with a bar of soap in my mouth. My mom raised the bar of soap and scraped it against my teeth. And I thought I had made a cool connection. And I thought it was kind of funny. And it also like spoke to what I couldn't put my finger on what I didn't think was right about the Catholic Church. But by her washing my mouth out with soap, intuitively, I'm like, oh, I must be onto something. And not all speech is free. At an early age. So that's probably one of the moments in a childhood full of moments that were, I had as much trauma as, anybody else who's still in comedy right now. But that was for sure a piece of my awareness of my words had power. I just didn't really know how to wield them at that point.
And then your route took you to touring a little bit was that after high school? Like what was after you did, so you're introduced in high school to improv a little bit. And then where did you go from high school?
So I'm in high school. I made the performing arts group, like our improv mime sketch comedy group, the Off Broad Ripple Company. So that's when I discovered puns were good for group names. And then I did like all the music stuff. I was like Golden Singers and Madrigals and Swing Choir. And then I sang like summer in like a barbershop quartet with a bunch of old guys. And I did improv before college. I was the young kid in a short form group made up of a bunch of people in Indianapolis that worked in radio and television, but they were like engineers. So they're like the sound mixers, the camera people, the producers, showrunners, whatever. But because I had been this, quote unquote star, I quit the basketball team my senior year. And that team won the state championship in Indiana in basketball, like much to my and my father's dismay and our basketball coach. My basketball coach was happy, but I was a pretty good basketball player. But then our comedy group won like best comedy group. We took Diary of Anne Frank to the State Thespian Festival. I was named to the Indiana All-Star Cast and best actor in the state, none of which felt as good as a state championship ring would have. But the die was cast. And then my freshman year in college, I went to Indiana University. I pledged a fraternity. We had study table when I was like pledging. So I did pretty well. I got like 3.2, 3.3 GPA my freshman year, that first semester freshman year. Then I moved into the fraternity and my GPA dropped to like a 1.8 4 or something. Whatever the GPA would be if you sleep with a bong next to your bed. Yeah, so my father read me the riot act. He was going to keep me home the following year to go to IUPUI and teach me how to study. And I got cussed out and all of this shit. And I was working on a paint crew in the hot sun, cleaning gutters and miserable. And it looks like we have a similar complexion. So, we're not good with sun.
Yeah, not at all.
I was suffering. I was looking forward to a year of college where my dad would oversee me. And I came home from working on the paint crew one day, and my mom was sitting at her table reading the paper, and she says, "Up with People's in town." Do you know what Up with People is?
Yeah.
Up with People's in town, Joe, and they're having interviews and auditions. You should go do that. And I said, "When do they leave?" And they're like, this was the beginning of June. "They leave in 6 weeks, like right after 4th of July. I'm like, "Yes, let me go do that. Let's see what that's about. Let me get the fuck out of here." So I went and I interviewed for Up with People with a couple of the women that I had been in swing choir and high school chorus and stuff with. And we all got accepted. And then the problem was it cost like $5,000 tuition. I'm air quoting that to tour. But my mother was not allowed to be a theater major at St. Mary's. And this is like, if I can digress and then digress, my great grandfather owned vaudeville houses along the Mississippi and Ohio River. And my grandfather, as a young man, helped him like clear out the vaudevillians and turn those into movie theaters, like the first movie theaters. So my grandfather's impression of actors and comedians and singers and dancers on vaudevillians was not good. And as my mother tells it, when she said, "I want to be a theater major," my grandfather said, "Over my dead body. They're all a bunch of alcoholics and drug addicts and whores," which is, there's stereotypes exist for a reason sometimes. So she was not allowed to do that. And my mom had mental health issues and was, she was fucked up in a lot of ways. But she would live her theater dreams through me. So like she was kind of my tie to, while my old man wanted me to be tougher and be a man's man and all that shit, my mom recognized that I had talent. So she asked my grandfather for the money to travel for Up with People, and he gave it to her, which I didn't hear the full story. I just knew my dad was pissed. And then off I went to Up with People for a year. So that's when the touring started. It started in the context of like singing and dancing and building bridges of love and peace and communication through engaging local communities and staying with host families and learning to share ideas with people from 25 or 26 or 28 different countries as a 19-year-old. And that's when I really experientially learned, oh my God, there's just so much more to life than living in Indiana.
Yeah.
And so, that for sure gave me the tour bug. And then I had to leave that tour like 3 weeks early to go back to work, to start making money to go back to school. And then once I got down to college, I guess it was, sophomore year, I was taking theater classes and, I kind of had the bug. And then by junior year, I saw one of the sheets of paper with the frayed edges, like we used to have in the old days, auditions for improv group. And it turned out that was Mick Napier and his buddy, Dave McNerland, who were starting an improv group at Indiana University. I auditioned for that with another guy, Eric Waddell, and we got cast in this improv group, and then half of that group would end up moving to Chicago between 85 and 87 and founding the Annoyance Theater. So that's kind of the lineage origin story, at least my piece of it. And then I was in.
So Mick was a student there as well at the time?
Yeah, Mick was at Indiana University. He was a theater major. I also was not allowed to be a theater major, even though my dad paid for first semester freshman year and second semester freshman year. And then due to my failings, he came up with the idea that for any A's or B's that I got, he would pay for that many credits the next semester. And any C's, we would split that amount. And then C minus and below, I had to pay for that many hours the next semester. So if I was going to stay in college, we're starting with what I owed him. So then that's what I learned what student loans were. And I had to, I'm just like, if I'm paying for this, then why can't I be my own major? Because you need a fucking major that it's going to be worthwhile in life. You need to study business. And so I studied audio engineering, like radio production performance. And then I was a minor in psychology and theater. And Mick was pure theater. And then in our improv group, I was the other telecommunications, the telecom guy with Mark Sutton, who I now tour Bass Prov with. But our group, it was like a great mix of people because it was people from, I was the frat guy. We had theater people, music people, architecture, journalism. Yeah, we had pretty legendary shows in college. And we aspired to do a different show every week. We played like Fridays and Saturday nights, and we'd always want to do a different show every week. And that's when we rehearsed from midnight to 3 a.m, 3 nights, like, I guess it was like Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then shows Friday, Saturday. And really the way that we worked, our process had a huge impact on me. And then that's when Mick, kind of the genius of Mick showed up, where he just had a really good eye and he knew how he just is innately good at understanding context and putting, the blocks together in a row to make sense in terms of a running order in a show. And I think that comes maybe from his dad, who was in construction. And so like Napier, I think his early genius was just learning how to construct anything and what's the sense of how you build something that's sturdy, just to put a cap on the metaphor.
Yeah. So were those shows that you were doing then long form?
No, this was before I learned long form. It was essentially a comedy review. It was kind of Second City style, I suppose.
Okay.
So we would use improv to write sketches. We would also write sketches and then fix them. And our shows were, I don't even remember. I think our shows were like 75 minutes maybe, and probably, 45 to 55 minutes of sketch, and then like 15 to 25 minutes of improv. So we would do like short form games. We did music stuff. We wrote song parodies. It was the first of many. Even in high school, I was lucky to find myself performing and creating with like very talented people. In college, it was the same. Like that 6 of us would go on to become pretty major players in the beginning of Annoyance. I don't know if any of us could have predicted, how well that would have gone. So sometimes you get lucky and you end up with good people.
Yeah. What was the inspiration for the sketch as the outlet? Was it one or some of you seen something? Was it because I'm assuming self-taught in this as well?
Yeah, I mean, I knew some from high school. So my high school education and being in the Off-Broad Ripple Company, we'll call it OBRC from here on out, if I need to refer to it. That taught me scenic construction and beginning, middle, and end and story. But in Double Take, then Mick had talked about, by that time, he had read Something Wonderful Right Away, Jeffrey Sweet's book. And so, I guess that means, like, I feel like that he wrote that in the set. I should know. I hope Jeffrey Sweet never hears this because we've hung out a couple times and he's great. He's a sweet guy, but I don't know shit. Anyway, so Mick kind of implored us to read that. And then by that time, Impro was out too. And so I knew of Spolin, Something Wonderful Right Away, like the history of Second City and like how they built a show, I think informed how we did Double Take shows. And then I think I encountered John Stone's book just in terms of his ideas around status in college or sometime. But by senior year, I had learned of Del Close. I had learned of long form. And upon graduating, the next step for me was like, well, let's go to Chicago and see what this whole seemingly team approach to improvisation is. Yeah, and in a way, I was drawn because I did have a little gap in my heart missing because I did love basketball. I did love like playing sports and stuff. And so, yeah, in meeting Del Close, I got to Chicago in 85, and I think he started working with Sharna like in 81. And by the time I got there, Barron's Barracudas was his, I mean, they were the team that ruled the day back then, and Del would work to extend beyond Harold. I guess the early model was Sharna would teach Harold, and then Del would teach now what can we do? What can we do with that? So they certainly did Harold's and other stuff. And then there was a version left over from David Shepard when I still got there of like a theater sports-ish type of thing, where we would then have long form competitions. And rather than it being scenes and games and whatnot, you would see 3 Harold groups. And then we would be judged. Oh God, I don't remember the categories, like teamwork, funny, story, sense, whatever the fuck. There was a flip chart. There was grading. Barron's Barracudas would win. But yeah, the long form, I really didn't know what the hell long form was until I kind of did it with Sharna and Del like 85, 86, 87.
And you're doing this with the other folk that came up from Indianapolis?
No, I was the first one up, and I was also doing stand-up at the time as well. So I came up, I was doing open mics. I moved up in 86, and then I think Mick and Faith and Eric came up in 87, and Dave McNerlin came up in 87. And then Mark Sutton moved back home to Tipton, but he ended up, I think Mark Sutton came like in 88 or 89. So in 87, the first Annoyance show was Splatter Theater, which is like a gore show. It's like a musical, except wherever there would be a song, you would kill people. I was the killer. And it was a completely white set. And Mick and I sat in a room above Cross Currents where IO was located at the time. And we were trying to figure out how to pull off bloody, gory deaths and then string those together in a story made of archetypes of people that you would see in a Halloween movie or something.
Yeah.
Splatter Theater is like teenage boy and his father moved to new neighborhood because mother died in a accident from involving a rusty garden implement. It was very presentational and campy. David Rosowski was that boy. I mean, again, this is like so lucky. We moved up there, and in 87, we were not Annoyance yet. We were Metroform. And so there was a handful of us that had went to Indiana together, and then people that Mick and I and others had met at IO and at Second City. And so now David Rosowski comes into our life. Susan Messing comes into our life. Brett Pazel comes into our life. Eric Waddell was the dad who, just another splash of great people. I think Dave Pasquazi and Tim Meadows, I think, and Howard Johnson, who wrote all the Python books. It was just from 85 to 95, the amount of talent that came through Chicago that existed, that performed together, that did stuff in Chicago, that now has such a huge footprint in all of comedy it's insane to look back on.
Yeah. Was the goal when you moved up, or is what you were doing when you look back on it, is anything preeminent in terms of, was it theater? Was it comedy? Was it improv? What was the thing you were doing?
I think my aim in 85 was to go to Second City to study, and then study with Del Close, and then survive by working in bars and restaurants. And essentially it was, let's look at Chicago like grad school. And so I was doing stand-up. I got headshots. I did commercial auditions. I was learning at Second City. I had a couple of good teachers there, a couple of not good teachers there. Like Sharna and Del intrigued me because it just seemed like this is the alternative world that kind of is aligned with my psycho ideas. Like, I'm born into the wrong family and what's going on and what's all this metaphysical shit. When I first met Del, we smoked a joint and I said, yeah, my dad played football for Notre Dame. I'm interested in this team approach. He goes, oh, he played for Notre Dame, huh? Yeah. Yeah, I taught Belushi how to shoot up. What? Oh, I better study with this guy. Like, what is that? Huh? And then Second City was just, it seemed like Second City had like this institutional fame on it. And so it kind of represented show business, I suppose. And IO represented something kind of artistic that was alternative, that tapped into like, it was the beginning of tapping into the well of trauma and shit I had repressed as an Irish child that I just, I mean, I don't know about you. I don't know how Irish you are or how skilled at repressing emotions and trauma you are. But I mean, when you're young, you think, oh, I just repress it and then it just goes away. And then you learn later in life, no. But IO made the most sense with me in terms of the spirit of what I was trying to do with stand up. But Second City made the most sense in terms of structure and poise and polish and more like how you present yourself in a laminated way that was both, I realized, oh, I'm resistant to this because like this is part of the quote unquote system. And for a while, in the early 80s, I thought, oh, maybe I'll get on stage at Second City. But really, once I started working regularly as a stand-up, which would have been like 87, 88, right when the annoyance started, I thought I was more likely to be successful doing stand-up than chasing the Second City Saturday Night Live track thing. So that was it. It's like, okay, let's go to grad school. Let's see what happens and let's follow what happens. That was the agenda. Yeah.
When you were doing the Splatter, or you said Metroform was the name of the group?
Metroform was the name of the group. It was named after, there's a club up here called Cabaret Metro. The Metro is where there's music acts and stuff. The Smart Bar is down below. And then up top, there's this attic that wasn't really being used. And it was just fucking hot, like fourth floor, no air conditioning. And so up there, a bunch of us, I wasn't in the core cast up there. I think there was like 5 or 6 people that did a bunch of the shows up there. And then some of us would guest. And I don't remember what the fuck we did. I think it was just long form stuff. We would just improvise up there. And so we used Metro and turned it into Metroform. And then in those days, I suppose like everybody in their 20s, that's when you first meet your witches and you're introduced to people who are enchanted by the dark arts and the metaphysical and all that bullshit. And so I think some of that maybe kind of filtered, whatever. We're fucking 23. What do we know? So it was Metroform, but then Splatter Theater started as Metroform, and I think Co-ed Prison Sluts started when we were Metroform. And there's a famous story where, so we're sharing a space with, at that time it was Improv Olympic. Metroform and Improv Olympic shared the same space. The space had been bought. It was like a blues club. James Cotton, it was one of Cotton Chicago, the blues player, bought that. Then he went through a divorce. And then I think his ex-wife or something had it. And then we were subleasing from her. And then she was using the money to run a cocaine ring and then not paying rent. And then one day the doors are locked and all of our shit's out on the street. And we're like, huh? And so that would have been, the late 80s, maybe. And then we all put our shit into storage and we're crying. And we went to Ann Sather's and had cinnamon rolls and Bloody Marys and got drunk and decided we needed to raise money and find a theater space. And I guess it was like 2 weeks later, we found a space. We raised $10,000 and Mick put a down payment on a burlesque club that had been closed for a couple of years. And the first annoyance was on Broadway, just south of Belmont, near where the Laugh Factory is now in Chicago.
Okay.
That'd take us to about, I guess, like 89, 90 maybe. As I give dates, all dates given by Joe are approximate. For exact dates, see interviews with especially Mark Sutton. And I think Mick kind of knows some of them as well.
So was the goal when you were sharing that space, when you were in the attic space or whatever, was the goal ever to start a theater, or was that a product of being kicked out and finding all your stuff on the street?
At Cotton Chicago. So we had Metroform was a theater group. It was like a repertory group. We had already formed. It was a group of people that wanted to do stuff our way. We were shocking and new. I think we just wanted to do original stuff. And I think one of the marketing thing that put us on the map was Mick's idea. For Splatter Theater, it was admission was free, but you had to pay to get out. And so I guess that would have been 87. We were like shock, alternative, and Co-Ed Prison Sluts was up there when we were Metroform. Now it's coming to me. We had Splatter Theater and Co-Ed Prison Sluts in this space. There's fucking gallons of stage blood everywhere. And this potty mouth musical that Faith Soloway did the music for. And Faith Soloway is a musical genius. And they and their sibling Joey went on to like create Transparent. And again, crazy lucky. But we made a big splash as Metroform. And then when we lost the space, it was a story because both Improv Olympic and Metroform were out, and Cotton Chicago and Cocaine Ring. And and then we opened up this theater, let's just say somehow. And all of a sudden the Annoyance was born. And Co-Ed Prison Sluts played. I think the second show Mick put up was That Darned Antichrist. And then, we would just make plays and musicals that had provocative names that amused us, but also lived up to their title. And then I think it was probably 91 or 92 that this dark potty mouth theater, which had garnered some attention. I think the Women of Annoyance had already also done the Miss Vagina pageant. It was like a dark take on pageants and stuff. And we had gotten some attention from like Lorne Michaels, and a couple of our women. Melanie Hutzel was in that, and Beth Cahill, and they made Saturday Night Live. So now we had this little commercial blip, and sometime right near then or shortly after, Faith and Joey wanted to put up the Real Life Brady Bunch because we didn't have any shows on Wednesday. I was like, yeah, we'll just like, Faith is a musical genius. Faith could create all of the musical sounds from Brady Bunch shows. And the idea was like, yeah, we'll all dress like people in the Brady Bunch, and we'll do the Real Life Brady Bunch, and we'll just, get high and have, Wednesday night Brady Bunch night. And the first night there was a line around the block, and we had to do 2 shows. And here we are. We're lucky again. Like, who's Mrs. Brady? Jane Lynch. Melanie Hutzel was Jan Brady. So yeah, maybe that was around the same time as Miss Vagina pageant. So Melanie Hutzel would do Jan Brady on Saturday Night Live. And then Mark Sutton was Mr. Brady. And then when Brady Bunch left, then Andy Richter, who was part of the theater, would become Mr. Brady, like off Broadway. But like all of a sudden now, the Real Life Brady Bunch, we would just literally do Brady Bunch episodes line for line, exactly as they existed. And then Eric Waddell, the lead into the Brady Bunch was a thing called the Real Life Game Show. And Eric Waddell produced that. And it was like, we would have a real game show and get sponsors from local businesses in the neighborhood. And it was this campy, weird ass game show. Eric Wayne Waddell would end up going on to be one of the producers on RuPaul's Drag Race. And and he's worked on a bunch of game shows in Hollywood and stuff. It's just, it's fucking insane. We go from potty mouth, co-ed prison slut, That Darn Antichrist, Miss Vagina pageant to like Brady Bunch, pop culture, Rolling Stone, Spin magazine, national fucking Sherwood Schwartz came to see the Brady Bunch to see if we were honoring his work. Okay. It was, and by 93, I had stopped doing stand-up and then just became fully invested because stand-up ended up being, my last years of stand-up were great, but I was also destroying myself. And so this was the age of like, look how fucked up I am. And like Sam Kinison and Bill Hicks a little bit. Hicks was around Chicago a lot. And I was all just like, yeah, I'm fucked up Irish Catholic guy. Look how fucked up I am. And then I would just live a life of a fucked up person off stage. And then I think it was 92 where Kinison died. And that plus going out to LA and then like the stand-up world revealing to me what it was like, oh, I better stop doing this or I'm going to be dead. I better just get back to improv. So I came back and became kind of fully dedicated to Annoyance around 92, 93. And right around that time is when we had our first split where a bunch of the Brady Bunch people, they took the Brady Bunch off Broadway to the Village Gate Theater in New York City. And then kind of the next So part 2 of the Annoyance began, and then soon after that, we moved to what we would call the Big Theater on Clark Street, north of Wrigley Field. I'm doing pretty good, like remembering the chronology here, just so you know. There's less lucid tellings of the history that exist online, so I feel like we're really getting it here.
Those early shows, you said the Brady Bunch was pretty much word for word the episodes. How much of the other shows were scripted? How much was unscripted?
We would use improvisation to create scripted plays and often musicals. And theoretically, those were 90% scripted and 10% had windows where you could fuck around. And youthful people being what they were, sometimes the scripts would become corrupted. And, we learned the lesson of, I mean, it's really one of the greatest lessons you can learn, like sacrifice the easy laugh now to like take care of the story and the integrity of the characters as you go on. So like we learned all those lessons, sometimes the hard way, but we almost always had, 1 to 4 improv shows during the week, I think throughout the 90s in the Big Theater.
Okay. Do any of those shows exist anywhere? Like if your old high school wanted to put on Co-ed Prison Sluts, could they get that from Concord or somewhere?
I don't think Co-ed Prison Sluts could be put on today. It was shocking and everything in the 90s, but I think, it's men and women in prison for horrible reasons, having gone through horrible shit. And the music is just catchy and genius and gorgeous. And so it's like horrible things being sung in a gorgeous way. And I think it would be too, I mean, you know what? The right cast could probably pull it off, and you could probably pull it off with some rewrites. But I think, especially given, let's just say, the emerging sensitivities to the to injustices, specific and in general, in the last 10 years, it would not be a good candidate to be brought back. But it's out there somewhere. But yeah, there's a musical that I worked with another one of our musical directors that dealt with some stuff that might work now. And I mean, we haven't done it in 25 years. We've talked about bringing it back. I'm trying to think of anything, the Brady Bunch started a whole little cottage industry of just like recreating. I mean, I think shit like Star Trek, the musical, and D&D, the improvised D&D. It's just like we could take pop culture stuff and reimagine them theatrically. I would point to the Brady Bunch as an influencer in that. And then actually, Bass Prov with Mark and I, those 2 characters are guys that we had a late night improv show called The Screw Puppies, which I was the director for like, I guess it was like 94 to 2000, which essentially meant I got the beer. I got the beer. There was always beer backstage. There was like a set, like 7 people in the cast. And then I had to choose like 2 more people to play each week. And so in the last couple of years, it was like I got to choose 2 people and disappoint 10 people who couldn't play that week, which is another kind of a leader lesson I learned. But there was Screw Puppies was famous. I think it was a pretty landmark annoyance show because it was potty mouth. It was midnight Saturday. The curtain speech was, there's 2 cases of beer backstage. You're going to give us a suggestion that we're going to ignore, and then we'll improvise till the beer's gone. And it became this exercise in like contextually protecting your potty mouth stuff, usually successfully and sometimes not successful at all. But that show was seen by some people and it influenced them. And most notably, I tour all over the world now. And there's a group in Paris that's like one of the best groups in Paris that was inspired by Screw Puppies. So that's cool. But Mark and I would do 2 characters in Screw Puppies that were like these guys from Indiana, because we're from Indiana, who would just pretend like they're fishing. And those scenes would always go longer than, people in the cast wanted. We called it a review style long form. So it's just like we would all take turns on the lights. Everybody would have to take a 7-minute rotation on the lights. And the lighting person could like take the lights out whenever you wanted or fuck with the lights or whatever. So some people, when Mark and I would just do these 2 guys that were pretending like they're fishing, they just leave the lights on for 7 minutes. At the end of their turn, they pull the lights out and then the next person would go up. And so we noted that we noted that a lot of people in the cast hated when we did that because we were like sucking this big chunk of time. And when by the time the Annoyance closed in 2000, we had the idea like maybe these guys could be a show. And so we developed it, ironically, at I.O. at a show called Slugfest, which is like kind of a new works thing, as Boat Prov. And then I think it was the 2001 Chicago Improv Festival. We debuted Bass Prov, and then we became the first touring duo show in the United States. And, a bunch of people, like, nobody's going to watch you guys sit there and pretend like you're fishing and talk and drink beer for an hour. Nobody's going to watch that shit. And 3 years after we started doing it, we're sitting on stage in front of 1,200 people at the Chicago Improv Festival, and Fred fucking Willard is sitting on stage with us pretending like he's fishing. So much of what I've experienced and what has me here today has just been like being at the right place in the right time, never being satisfied with the same thing over and over and over again. And Mark and I still do Bass Prov, but I mean, we do maybe COVID, we didn't do any shows. After COVID, I had 3 cancers, went through chemo, survived all that. So like for 5 years, we maybe did no shows during COVID, a couple of shows, and then I had cancer, and then no shows for a couple of years. And now we're back to, we'll do maybe 10 shows a year. But it's, so much of it is just never stop doing it, always look to grow, always look for like, what's the next thing we can do? Who's the next person I can play with? And then luck, being lucky.
A few people remember Bass Prov from the Fool Fest in Orlando, one of the Fool Fests.
Yep. It was one of the first places we took it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like it would have been one of the earlier ones.
Yeah.
And we're highly influenced by that. And no pun intended with your Ripple group, but there's ripples of Bass Prov, in Florida, in the Orlando community, that are still, felt from that visit down there early on. I saw you all do it in Miami, I think in 2008.
Yeah.
And I've seen it since then. So it started as a character piece. Did you codify a form, or are there just moves that you understand, oh, this is going to lead to the rant or anything like that, things that happen every show? Or
I mean, really, it's like Mark and I just know each other. And like we're both from Indiana, and we grew up, an hour apart from each other. My dad worked in the small town that Mark grew up in. We were the 2 telecom guys in our college group. We both like sports and we both like the arts. We're both huge Indiana basketball fans. In a way, we share a brain, but we're also different enough that I think we complement each other pretty well. So we complement each other pretty well, and the things that we're aligned on really it just feeds into like how our brains know what to do. When we did it, it was first out of the defiance of, we thought of, what if we just do, like a deconstruction, let's do like 10 minutes in the boat, then we'll get up and we'll do scenes based on that. And then we're like, no. And then people would say, why don't you guys just like get out of the boat and then do some scenes? No. So the more people told us, you guys should get out of the boat. We can both be pretty fucking stubborn, but hopefully, no, it's rooted. We know that we're good. And so, I mean, that, not to be a dick, but it's like, we just had faith in ourselves. And some of that is just part of our makeup of being like, of growing up in Indiana, and like, work hard, do your work, and don't do your work to get by, do your work to get better at your work. I would say. And then Bass Prov just unfolded. It was like, we're just going to talk, and then we'll figure out what this thing is as we did it. And, by the time we hit the 3-year mark and Fred Willard's in the boat with us, we knew the different types of shows that could show up. And ultimately, I think it's like, we just trust each other. Like, I feel like if I'm on stage with Mark Sutton, everything's going to be okay. And I'm lucky now, because I mean, now there's like 10 different people in the world. My whole thing is duo improv. I'll play with anybody, and I'll be, I'm a professional improviser, which, I'm part whore. I will improvise pretty much with anybody. But I love 2-person, 1 hour or longer shows. I love improvised plays. And a lot of what I know about it, a lot of my expertise has come from learning on the job with Mark Sutton. And then subsequently, Again, Lucky. 5 years later, Jill Bernard. 5 years later, Patty Stiles. 5 years later, Lee White. Somewhere in there, David Rosowski. So we know that there's certain things we can do in Bass Prov, but we also know if we try to recreate anything from a previous show, we're dead. So if there's any codification, it might be that it's a conversational herald that happens between two guys who are sitting in those chairs because they truly want to catch a fish. And that's like the acting objective of it.
Yeah. What do you think the special magic is about that show and shows like that make them so watchable? Because watching through the Oscar-nominated films, I think the Bass Prov shows are more watchable, more engaging than some of the movies we've watched recently.
Sure.
And not, I mean, there's some of fantastic acting, but there's something about Bass Prov and shows of that nature that we can watch you just sit there and fish and be entertained and enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the special magic is there that allows that to happen?
I mean, some of it is skill and experience. I'm also a neuroscience nerd, so anybody who's ever studied with me knows one of my obsessions is how do we improvise without any evidence of self-consciousness on our face? And so that just means, and I mean, by that, I mean like scenically, or if we're going to improvise a story, a play or whatever, how can we be fully present? And I think now there's more people than ever in the world that improvise, and there's more displays of self-consciousness and masking trauma that exist in the world on improv stages more than ever. And so from the psychological point of view, Mark and I know who those characters are. You never see a moment of apology. You never see a moment of doubt. You see what I'm talking about in my book is like it's a professional approach to improvisation, which is it's the unspoken agreement of let's play to the top of our game today. And so in my book, I delineate between three different kind of mindsets when we improvise. One is recreational, which is most improv, which just brings us to improv, which is like, let's just do this to have fun. And especially, with a lot of the younger set, it's like, let's just have fun. And if we have fun, the audience will have fun. And that's not wrong, but it's also not right. And then the other is hobbyist, which is, I put hobbyist as like, we want to do one kind of improv. We want to do just musical. We want to do just Jane Austen. We want to do just Harold. We want to do just D&D prov. We want to do just, Shakespeare, whatever. And so in the hobbyist, it's like, we're going a narrow focus and we're going to get this really right, or we're going to get this really wrong and fuck with it. And getting it really right kind of moves in like professional hobbyists, which is like the Chicago Improvised Shakespeare group is to me, it's the best improvised Shakespeare I've seen in the world. And I don't even like Shakespeare.
Yeah.
But that's because Blaine, who runs that, requires all of them to know not just iambic pentameter, but what's the history of England and France and Scotland and what's going on in the world around the time of Shakespeare, what's going on in his tragedies, what's going on in his histories, what's going on in his comedies, what's the shit behind the scenes. So they're in what I call the brain of creation much more than they're in the brain of recreation. In the brain of recreation, you get displays of self-consciousness. And I think especially with technology and AI and stuff, I think right now is the time for people to practice as improvisers if they want to aim towards playing to the top of their game beyond let's just have fun. I think it's the time for people to understand that the time is going to come where audiences are going to need even more than today to be around other people with live human experiences, with authentic presence, with authentic connection, and authentic skill in improvising as actors. And I look at myself as an improvisational actor first and an improvisational comedian second.
Yeah.
I teach comedy as a consequence of connection. Bass Prov is comedy as a consequence of connection. Bass Prov is a story of two old friends getting back together and reconnecting in a boat after not seeing each other for a while. And that's become what mine and Mark's life is. And we live a mile apart and never see each other. 90% of the time when we see each other, it's because we're doing a Bass Prov show somewhere else. And so I think it's that authenticity, and it's that, I mean, we're good at doing Bass Prov. I think we're both pretty good improvisers too, but I think a lot of improvisation that's aiming for comedy right now, I think there's still unspoken trauma left over from COVID, the isolation of COVID. And I think the trauma of existing in America right now, we all know that we're in a traumatized place, and whether we're a type of person that will admit it or a type of person that denies it, what we want to do is to escape. And so we don't want to escape, in my opinion, we don't want to escape into a theatrical place where we're watching other people on stage who are desperate to escape and behaving like they're desperate to escape reality. We want to see people performing with some type of skill and commitment to what they're doing. And so I think a lot of what is hampering improvisation right now is primarily people doing it to have fun, and primarily people doing it to entertain like kind of each other and to escape how fucked up everything is in the world. And so you sit in rooms where there's people sitting watching people on a stage, and it's, in a way, it's like, are we pulling off escapism tonight? So there's my deep answer to your simple question.
No, I love it because and that brings up some other thoughts as well. But I didn't know, it's like, is it that we're all at heart, we're just voyeurs and we enjoy watching that because it's like we're eavesdropping on these lives? Is it because we connect with those two guys in some way? Is it because we know those people, especially if we're from the Midwest? Is it, like, what's so enticing about that? Because it is infinitely watchable and has been for a long time.
I mean, we're 25 years in. We're both going to be 64 this year. I mean, in general, if you say, oh, do you want to go see two 64-year-old guys do an improv show? No, I don't. I don't blame anybody for not, if you don't know what Bass Prov is or don't know me and Mark, I would not blame a single young person for being distrustful of the entertainment value of Bass Prov at all. But again, we got lucky because we have gone fishing together. We are from Indiana. Fishing is a thing you do in Indiana and in the Midwest and in, quote unquote, flyover country. So we play authentic American guys. And even in the earliest days, Mark's character, Donnie, tends to sit a little bit more in conservative posture with flavors of liberal, and I tend to sit in a little more liberal posture with flavors of conservative. And we're just two guys just trying to get along, and anything we think, any theories or opinions we have, and we have lots of them, are secondary to, we're going to catch a fucking fish today. And we rarely talk about catching a fish. I'll say we might mention it, but you see, as actors, these guys are focused on catching a fish. And it's in our demeanor, it's in our behavior. And after the show, every once in a while we still do, but for years after a show, we'd come off stage, we really wouldn't remember what we said, but we know what the conditions were. And are we throwing into the shadows? Are we throwing into weeds? What lures are you using? Was it overcast? Are we flipping spoons in the weeds? Or, were we fishing into the shore or, away from, without ever talking about it on stage? And so, to me, I think that has something to do with the watchability. That's also, to come back to your original point, I mean, I think the audience's, and to be fair, this is annoyance too, the audience's enjoyment will be a consequence of our connection, the nature of our connection.
Yeah.
And if the nature of our connection allows us to co-author this play together at the top of our skill, then the audience is going to have a great time, and we're going to have a great time.
In there as well, some of the threads that I'm possibly seeing, and one of the reasons I asked about when you were starting out, what was preeminent, what if there was something that was preeminent, whether it was comedy, theater, or improv, is that it seems that through your experience through the beginning of Annoyance, there wasn't as much of a delineation between theater and improv. It wasn't you're doing improv versus you're doing theater. All of this was sort of happening at the same time, and it wasn't seen necessarily as anything where that excluded the other. And even what was happening at Annoyance with you're producing things that are scripted mostly, but you're also producing improv, and it's not that one was looked on more highly than another. It's just one was marketed differently.
I think if there was any core value, it was comedy. I mean, Mick's our leader. Mick was the one. I think Mick codified his ideas, and then we all lived the quote unquote ideal of Annoyance. That it had this symbiotic relationship between what Mick was articulating and what we were living. And so we would live what Mick would articulate, but Mick would also articulate what we were living. And Mick values comedy. I mean, Mark and I are also like, there's some dramatic shit that Mark and I did at Annoyance, and Mick's like, where's the fucking funny, man? We did a rock opera or a rock operetta that was like super heavy, big band. Mark was kind of this dramatic star. I mean, it was called Bloodlines. And Mick was pissed because one of the characters in the show, awesome woman, Yvonne Bruner, was the lead singer of a band called Big Hat, gorgeous singing voice, beautiful singer, dancer, person, whatever. And so she's the mother on, there's two sides, the order and the flow. They're like, some of this is my shit. Mark is the bastard son of a father of the order and the mother of the flow. And they tried to kill him when he was a baby and they sent him down the river. And there's these fucking epic music. And Yvonne is like the mother, and we kill her like in the first act of the play. And it's like, oh, that's great. So this is a rock opera. And to start the show, we're going to kill the best singer in the whole fucking play. And we're like, well, yeah. And so it's like, it began with, we're doing comedy. We're doing sketch comedy. We're doing musical theater comedy. We're doing comedy. It's to make people laugh. And I mean, if you ask Mick now, Mick will tell you he hates comedy. He can't enjoy comedy anymore. But the other goal is we are using improvisation as a tool to create whatever. And then anybody that was part of the Annoyance sort of repertory group could pitch or produce anything that they wanted. And really, I think this is true. It was often said, like, you just have to be a nice person. Like, if you're a dick, you can't be here. And it didn't mean that we didn't treat each other horribly sometimes or talk, shit to each other. But there was also a familial thing that was just like any other theater. There's famous stories of all the guys and the women that started Steppenwolf Theater screaming and yelling at each other, fucking Malkovich and Gary Sinise and Jeff Perry and all them, like yelling at each other about artistic choices in their 20s when they're in the back room of a bar. And so there was some of that too. But it also forced us to have conviction in what we were creating and then live up to do something good. So it wasn't just, let's just have fun. Well, to be fair, there were some shows where like, let's just have fun. This show is going to be terrible. Let's have fun while we're doing it. But I think the ethos is, let's be funny. Let's use improvisation as a tool to create whatever. And let's let Annoyance be a space. And I think, even to this day, and I'm like 2 generations removed now. Like, I'm a retired supportive alumni since like 2002. Young people can come and speak their vision and put something on stage. And the success that Mick and Jen have had outside of their vision and their work is also due to allowing younger voices, younger creative minds to imagine something that ends up being put on stage. Whereas I think, Second City and IO being the other 2 institutions in Chicago, I think they're a lot more off the rails from their origins, which also isn't necessarily a bad thing. I still love going to the Annoyance way more than to the other 2 places because there's still part of it that I recognize.
Was one of the goals in its inception, before it was Annoyance, you mentioned because you wanted to do your own thing, and Second City and IO didn't, Improv Olympic didn't have space for you to do your own thing, to have something from inception to fully realized vision. you couldn't do that in those other places and therefore Annoyance had to happen? Or was there another reason that Annoyance kind of sprung forth when the other two exist?
I think Mick speaks to this in some of his interviews where he just, he talks about, we did want something that was an alternative to the other two, I suppose. We didn't want to do, quote unquote, what the other two did. Also, I mean, you can, Andy Richter has a podcast, and he's referred, Andy Richter was around the Annoyance a lot in the early days. And he would talk about going back to IO and saying, yeah, I'm doing a show at Annoyance. And then people of that time at IO was like, well, what are you doing hanging out with all those gay weirdos? And so we were the gay weirdo theater, and kind of still are, and like proudly. We were the island of misfit toys. We were the disenfranchised could go, where alternative gender, identity, sexuality, whatever could exist. And maybe what was shocking was that like everybody, such a diverse group of interests and people and tastes and whatever, could work together to put up shows that were like super gay or not gay at all, or just plain bad or fucking shocking. By definition, we invited in and gave a space for those who wouldn't normally be welcome at Second City or IO. And I got to say that Mick was more aware of that, I think, than a lot of us. We certainly know we knew we were part of the gay weirdos. We knew that we were part of the Island of Misfit Toys, but IO and Second City have been burdened with some not great records of inclusion. And if you go to the Annoyance today, you can walk into that bar and see a drag show, see every color of face, see every orientation of everybody there, see a pretty good show back on the main stage that could be Potty Mouth or I Love Hitch Cocktails. It's like improvised Alfred Hitchcock and the cast is getting drunk during the show, or some of the cast is. And you can also see stand-up, you can see improv stuff. Like every cut of person is in there. Every cut of person is welcome in there that's not a dick, that's not an asshole. And I think it's because we, in a way, we embraced a larger swath of humanity than the other two places. And it's Mick's really good at what he does. He's really good at educating like young producers about how to get their vision in some creative way to be up on stage, with like integrity, so some of them still remains, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So you're not just pandering to a commercial sensibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it for part 1 of my interview with Joe Bill. Of course you should go see him play or take a workshop from him if he's near you, or go to him. Check out the Patreon for free bonus content and come back for part 2. Thanks for listening to Improv Autopsy.